Your brain remembers the exact smell of your childhood home. It remembers the lyrics to a song you haven't heard in 15 years. It remembers the face of a stranger who sat across from you on a train in 2019 and never said a word. But the name of the person standing right in front of you, someone you've met 3 times, completely gone. That's not carelessness. That's not rudeness. That's something far more interesting happening inside your head. That moment, you've been there before, standing in a meeting room, at a rooftop party, or simply in the office hallway, looking directly at someone you are certain you've met. Not once, maybe 2, 3 times. You even remember that they take their coffee black with no sugar. You remember them mentioning that their dog was sick. You remember the exact way they scratch their head whenever they're thinking. But their name? Gone. Completely gone. Not the kind of "it's right on the tip of my tongue" feeling, but an absolute, clean emptiness. As if that name was never filed away in any drawer of your mind to begin with. And then begin the most terrifying 15 seconds of your day. You smile. Just wide enough to look natural, not so wide that it crosses into something unsettling. You say, "Oh, it's been a while," with enthusiasm so carefully performed that even you want to apologize to yourself for it. Your eyes quietly dart to the right. Is there anyone nearby who might casually drop this person's name? Will their phone ring? Will someone walk past and greet them out loud? Nothing. Just you, them, and the silence expanding between you like a soap bubble about to burst. In an age where everything gets saved, photos backed up automatically to the cloud, messages archived for 5 years without losing a single word, AI remembering your search history from back when you were still single, forgetting the name of someone you've met multiple times seems almost inexcusable. This is the era of LinkedIn reminding you about a colleague's birthday, of Facebook telling you, "Today marks 7 years of friendship with men," of contact lists that store profile pictures and personal notes. And yet here you are, blank, still smiling. And the worst part isn't forgetting. The worst part is what happens right after. You start putting yourself on trial. Am I a selfish person? Do I genuinely care about anyone? Or am I just drifting through life, meeting people, and letting them fade away like unread messages? That quiet spiral of self-blame, never spoken aloud, never fully examined, is something a lot of people carry without ever realizing it. Not because they're careless, not because they lack intelligence or basic decency, but because no one ever told them the truth. Forgetting someone's name says nothing about how much you value them. It says everything about how your brain is wired. And once you understand what is happening inside your mind in the exact moment someone's name is spoken for the first time, you will never see yourself the same way again. Let's start right there, at that moment. Your brain isn't broken. It's just busy. Here's what nobody tells you about the moment you meet someone new. Your brain is not sitting there, calm and ready, like an empty notepad waiting to jot things down. It is running at full capacity. It is doing the cognitive equivalent of cooking 5 dishes at once while someone is asking you for directions, and the smoke alarm is going off in the background. In the span of just a few seconds, without you consciously deciding any of it, your brain is reading their face, scanning for warmth, for threat, for familiarity. It's registering tone of voice. It's calculating where you stand socially. It's pulling up every unwritten rule about how you're supposed to behave in this exact type of situation. It's monitoring your own body language, wondering if you're standing too close, if your expression looks right, if you seem like someone worth talking to. And right in the middle of all of that, right in the eye of that storm, someone hands you a sound. "Hi, I'm David." David. Your brain receives it, holds it for a moment, and then, almost immediately, lets it go, because Kevin doesn't connect to anything. It doesn't trigger an image. It doesn't pull up memory. It doesn't remind you of a place or a feeling or a story. It just floats there, unattached, in a mind that is frankly too overwhelmed to babysit a single, arbitrary syllable. Psychologists actually have a name for this. In 1987, researchers McWeeny and Ellis ran a study that revealed something quietly unsettling about the way human memory works. They showed participants a photo of a stranger and told one group that the person in the photo was a baker by profession. They told a separate group that the person's last name was Baker. Same word, same photo, completely different results. Days later, the people who learned the occupation remembered it with ease. The people who learned it as surname had largely forgotten it. And the reason comes down to something fundamental about how your brain decides what's worth keeping. The word baker, as a job, doesn't arrive alone. It brings an entire world with it. The smell of bread in the early morning, flour-dusted hands, the sound of an oven timer, a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from starting work before sunrise. Your brain has somewhere to put it, something to attach it to, a whole network of associations that holds it in place. The word baker, as a name, arrives with nothing. No context, no image, no feeling, just a label, handed to you at the worst possible moment, asking to be remembered for no particular reason. And your brain, efficient, ruthless, always making decisions without consulting you, quietly decides it has bigger things to deal with. This is what researchers call semantic emptiness, and it's the hidden reason names are so much harder to remember than almost any other kind of information. Think about the last truly memorable conversation you had. You probably remember the point where things got unexpectedly honest. You remember the moment someone said something that shifted the way you saw them. You remember a specific joke that landed harder than expected, or a pause that lasted just a beat too long and said more than words could. You do not remember exactly how they introduced themselves, because your brain was already busy deciding that the introduction was the least interesting part of the whole exchange. It was already moving toward the things that actually mattered, the texture, the emotion, the meaning underneath the words. Names are just the door. Your brain has always been more interested in what's inside the room. And here's where it gets personal. Because for a lot of people, the problem isn't just that names are semantically empty. The problem is that the moment a name is being offered, their brain isn't even fully in the room. It's already somewhere else entirely. And that's where things get interesting. You were there. Your mind wasn't. Think about the last time you were introduced to someone at a gathering. Maybe it was a colleague's birthday dinner. Maybe at a friend's wedding reception. Maybe just a casual get-together where someone pulled you into a circle of people you'd never met and said, "Oh, you have to meet." And at that exact moment, before the name even finished leaving their mouth, something else was already happening inside your head. Do I look okay right now? Is my smile natural, or does it look forced? Should I extend my hand first, or wait for them to? Am I standing at a weird angle? Did I just talk too much about myself in the last conversation? Do these people want me here, or am I reading the room wrong? The name floated in, and then your own mind drowned it out. This isn't carelessness. This isn't indifference. This is something psychologists have documented with uncomfortable precision. And once you hear it, you'll recognize it instantly, because you've lived it more times than you can count. In 1973, psychologist Malcolm Brenner identified something called the next-in-line effect. He discovered that people who were waiting for their turn to speak in a group setting, people who were mentally rehearsing what they were about to say, showed dramatically reduced memory for everything the person directly before them had said. Not because they weren't paying attention, not because they didn't care, but because in their mind, they had already moved on. They were already in the next moment, editing themselves, preparing, managing. And so, the present moment, the name, the face, the words being offered to them right then, slipped through without ever truly landing. Now here's the part that might hit a little close to home. For people who live with social anxiety, or even just a quietly hyperactive self-awareness, that state isn't occasional. It's permanent. Every social interaction becomes a kind of internal performance review, running simultaneously alongside the actual conversation. One part of them is present, nodding, responding. Another part is watching from a slight distance, narrating, critiquing, bracing. Was that the right thing to say? Did I laugh too loudly? Are they bored? Am I being too much? Not enough? And the name, that small, brief, unrepeated sound, gets caught in the crossfire and simply doesn't survive. If you recognize yourself in this, I want you to sit with something for a moment. You weren't absent because you didn't care. You were absent because your mind has spent years learning to protect you, scanning for social danger, anticipating judgment, trying to keep you safe in rooms that once felt anything but safe. That hypervigilance didn't appear from nowhere. It was built, slowly, from experiences that taught you that being in a room full of people required more than just showing up. It required performance, managing, getting it right. And somewhere along the way, the cost of all that invisible effort became this. You lose the name every single time, while somehow holding on to everything else. Because here's what's quietly remarkable about the way you remember people. You might not remember their name, but you remember the exact moment their faces changed when they talked about something they loved. You remember the specific joke that made them laugh harder than they expected to. You remember the slight hesitation before they said something honest. You remember what they were really saying underneath the words they used. You were paying attention, just not to the part that was easiest to measure. And the cruelest irony of all this is that the very thing that makes you forget names, that deep, restless, overactive inner world, is the same thing that makes you the kind of person others feel genuinely seen around. The same sensitivity that gets hijacked during introductions is what allows you to pick up on things most people miss entirely. The exhaustion of being so internally present is, in a strange way, the price of being truly present for other people. But now think about the other side of this. Think about the person whose name you forgot. They smiled when you greeted them. They laughed at something you said. And then later, maybe on the drive home, maybe lying in bed that night, it crept in, that quiet, pointed thought. They didn't remember my name. Again, it doesn't matter that you remember the story about their sister. It doesn't matter that you remembered the thing they said that stayed with you for days. In that moment, the brain doesn't do nuance. The brain hears one thing. You didn't matter enough to stick. And that small sting, politely swallowed, never mentioned, is real. It would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. This is why it matters to understand what's happening, not to excuse forgetting, but to replace the wrong story, on both sides, with the true one. You weren't indifferent. You were overwhelmed by your own interior world at the exact moment a name needed a place to land. And they weren't forgotten. They were just met by someone whose mind was already fighting a battle they couldn't see. That's not a character flaw. That's a very human kind of struggle. And it has a name, even if, for now, you can't quite remember it. The people who forget names remember everything else. There's a particular kind of person who forgets names. You probably know one. You might be one. And if you are, there's a good chance you've spent years quietly convinced that this one specific failure, this single, recurring blank, is evidence of something shameful. That underneath all the nodding and the listening and the genuine interest, you're somehow not there. That you're moving through your relationships like a tourist, present in body, absent in spirit. I want to offer you a different explanation. Not a comfortable one, a true one. The people who forget names are almost never the people who care the least. They are very often the people who care the most, just not about the part of a person that can be printed on a name tag. Their memory doesn't work like a filing cabinet. Neat. Categorical. A name in one drawer, a face in another, a job title neatly labeled and stored. It works more like a living thing, breathing, feeling, constantly reaching for meaning and connection. It stores people not as data points, but as experiences. Not as names, but as presences. Not as labels, but as the quality of aliveness someone brings into a room. Ask this kind of person what a stranger said to them on a delayed flight 3 years ago, and they'll tell you. Not just the words, the weight behind them, what the person was carrying that day, what they were afraid of saying out loud, but said anyway. Ask them about a conversation at a dinner party they attended when they were 23, and they'll remember the exact moment the energy in the room shifted, the sentence that made someone go quiet, the look that passed between two people who thought no one was watching. They were watching. They are always watching, always listening, always picking up the frequencies that most people never even notice is being broadcast. But ask them the name of the person they just spent 2 hours talking to, the person they genuinely connected with, whose story moved them, whose presence they will carry home without even realizing it. And the name is gone. Because while that conversation was happening, their mind was fully, completely, almost desperately occupied doing something else. It was feeling the pauses. It was reading the slight hesitation before an honest answer. It was holding the moment when someone's eyes changed, just barely, just for a second, when they talked about something they had never quite said out loud before. The name never stood a chance. Not because the person didn't matter, but because to this kind of mind, the name was always, always, the least interesting thing about them. And here is the cruelest part of all this. We live in a world where the name is everything. The smooth recall, the confident, "Good to see you again, Sarah," delivered without a flicker of hesitation. We have collectively agreed that remembering a name is the shorthand for caring about a person. That is the baseline proof of respect, of warmth, of social competence. And so, the people who can't do it, who blank on it, who fumble through it, who smile just a little too carefully to cover the gap, they walk around carrying a shame they never feel entitled to mention. Because how do you explain it? How do you look at someone and say, I forgot what you were called, but I remember the exact way your voice changed when you talked about your father. I remember the thing you said that I've been thinking about for 3 weeks. I remember you. All of you. Just not the sound your parents assigned to you before you'd done a single thing worth remembering. You can't say that. It sounds like an excuse even when it's the truth. So, you say nothing. You perform the smile. You angle your body toward the door and wait for someone else to say the name first. And later, alone, you add it quietly to the list of evidence against yourself. I want you to take it off that list. Not because forgetting names doesn't matter. Not because the person on the other end doesn't feel it. They do, and that's real, and it deserves to be acknowledged. But because of the story you've been telling yourself about what it means, that story is wrong. It has always been wrong. And you have been paying a price for a crime you didn't commit. You are not absent. You are not shallow. You are not moving through the world without really registering other people. You are someone whose mind is so busy finding the soul of a person that it forgets to file the name. And yes, that costs you something in a world that values the name above almost everything else. But think about what it gives the people around you. Think about how it feels to be truly seen. Not surface read, not efficiently cataloged, but seen, underneath the introduction, underneath the small talk, underneath the version of themselves they usually remember to perform. That's what you offer. Every time. Without trying. Without even knowing. The name was always the least of it. You were always paying attention to everything that mattered. The toll of the ghost message. But we cannot only look at one side of the mirror. To be completely honest with the way human relationships work, we must admit a counter-truth. Being on the receiving end of this, being the person whose name is forgotten, actually hurts. It is a strange, quiet kind of pain. You don't have a valid reason to be angry. You know they didn't do it on purpose, yet your chest tightens just a bit. When you approach someone, smiling, ready to say their name, and you catch that split-second flash of absolute emptiness in their eyes, driven by its most primal survival instincts, automatically translates that blank stare into a painful message. You didn't matter enough to be kept. It feels exactly like sending a thoughtful, heartfelt text, only to watch the notification change to read, followed by total silence. A real-world, face-to-face ghost message. And this is where the grand irony of human connection hides. The person who forgot your name might be the one who remembers you the most deeply. They might remember, with vivid clarity, the exact shift in your voice when you spoke about your sister. They remember the angle of your face when you laughed at a throwaway joke in a coffee shop 3 weeks ago. They were there. They were genuinely, beautifully connected to you. They just weren't there for the single, fleeting second when your name was spoken aloud. The sting of being forgotten is entirely real, but the assumption behind it is a massive misunderstanding. Human memory was never built to be a tidy filing cabinet, and it was certainly never meant to be a measuring tape for how much we care. Part 6. The Anatomy of Memory. Your brain is not a hard drive. We live under the collective illusion that the human brain operates like a hard computer drive. We expect it to scan a piece of data, click Save, and store it neatly in a folder, untouched by time. But neuroscience tells a completely different story. Your brain is a living, breathing editor, ruthless, efficient, and deeply biased. It doesn't record everything. It only keeps what it deems expensive. And the brain's currency for what is expensive follows a very strict set of rules. It prioritizes high emotional resonance, a flash of fear, a burst of genuine joy, a deep ache of empathy. The unexpected, anything that breaks the mundane pattern of daily life. Logical connectivity, a new piece of information that can immediately latch onto an existing web of old memories. Now, look at how a name enters the room. The name is a random, arbitrary syllable. It arrives with no image, no backstory, no inherent emotion. It is handed to you at the exact millisecond when your brain is already running on overdrive, trying to navigate a room full of strangers. To your survival-driven mind, that name is like a promotional flyer slapped onto your car windshield. Harmless, but destined to be thrown into the glove box, or the trash, at the very next intersection, just so you can keep your eyes on the road. People who constantly forget names do not have a broken memory. They possess alternative cognitive architecture. They are associative thinkers. They map the world in landscapes, not data points. They can remember the exact vintage texture of the jacket you wore to a dinner party 3 years ago, or the peculiar way your eyes dart when you're lying, but completely blank on the name of the person standing right next to you. This is not a biological defect. This is the tax paid by a mind that was custom-built for storytelling, for deep empathy, and for visceral listening, building the artificial bridge. So what do? Do we just walk through life carrying this quiet shame, hoping the world will magically read our minds and forgive us? No. Once you realize that your brain refuses to build an automatic bridge for names, you must build an artificial one. There are practical, neurological hacks that you can deploy within the first 5 seconds of meeting someone. The echo technique. The moment they say, "Hi, I'm David," do not just nod and move on. Force your vocal cords to repeat it. "Hi, David. It's really great to meet you." This simple act forces the brain to process the sound through both the auditory and the active language centers, doubling its chances of survival. The anchor technique. Give the name a home. If their name is Ivy, don't just leave it floating. Mentally paint vines climbing up their shoulders. If their name is Rivers, imagine the sound of running water behind their voice. Give your brain a map so it knows how to navigate back to the word when you need it. Radical vulnerability. If all else fails, liberate yourself from the 15 seconds of terror. Stop performing the fake smile. Look them in the eyes and say, "I am so sorry. I remember every single detail of the story you just told me about your dog, but my brain just completely erased your name. Remind me one more time." That confession doesn't make you look careless. It makes you look profoundly human. It instantly shatters the artificial barrier of small talk and replaces it with real, raw intimacy. The material of a soul. The silent spiral of self-blame. The quiet lie we've swallowed that forgetting a name equals indifference needs to be exposed and dismantled. We have spent too long judging ourselves and others based on surface-level data. We praise the social chameleons who can smoothly recall every name in a boardroom of 20 people, treating it as the gold standard of respect, while forgetting that sometimes it's just a well-rehearsed social script. A polished performance. A name, when you strip it down to its bones, is always the least interesting thing about a person. It is an administrative label assigned to you by your parents before you had ever done a single thing on this earth worth remembering. But the things that truly define you, the raw material that makes up your soul, the specific cadence of your laugh, the heavy things you carry in silence, the way you show up for people when the room gets dark, none of that is contained in a name. It lives in the space between the words. It lives in how you make people feel. So, if tomorrow someone blanks on your name, or if you find yourself staring into the terrifying void of a forgotten acquaintance, take a breath, smile, and forgive the flawed, beautiful machinery inside both of your heads. Because the things that genuinely matter between two people are never truly lost. They are still there. They have always been there, just a little deeper than a name.